Hey, it's Nathan Selove from Oakcroft Films with another edition of Autism Actually Speaking. Today we're going to discuss an issue that has created a lot of controversy in the autism community as well as people who have relationships with autistic people. The high-functioning versus low-functioning idea. Now this is something that for a while I myself had mixed feelings about. For those of you who've watched several of my videos, you might know that I was originally diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, and this is a designation given to those of us with what they refer to as high-functioning autism. However, a few years ago, the designation of Asperger's actually got removed from the DSM. In many ways, this was because although autism is a spectrum disorder, this type of oversimplification fails to take into account the vast range of challenges that people with autism face, as well as the many gifts that they're given as a result of this condition. I'll say it again like I said it before. You met one autistic? You met one autistic. The reason why I think that the continued use of the terms high-functioning autism and low-functioning autism is problematic is not necessarily because I somehow think that some autistics don't need more support or different support than other autistics. They do. I need a service dog. Many autistic people don't. I didn't need a special ed class. Many autistic people do. And that's okay. The reason why it's problematic is because of how it's used. Rather than being used as an objective standard of functionality, high functioning versus low functioning is often decided based on how well an autistic can pass as neurotypical. Now, to a lot of people, this classification might make sense because you might argue, if something needs to be accommodated, then doesn't that make it a bad thing? However, keep in mind, we have to accommodate a neurotypical world that doesn't communicate in the same way that we do. For example, for a lot of autistics, eye contact is really uncomfortable, but the value of eye contact is completely societally constructed, and yet many of us still try to accommodate neurotypicals because we know that they feel more comfortable when we're looking them in the eyes. So I'll often look at someone in the eyes even if it is difficult for me. And I know a lot of autistics who will even try different methods to look people in the eyes or make it seem like they're looking them in the eyes, like looking at their nose instead. But that is purely to accommodate the neurotypical. These are learned behaviors. Behaviors that we had to develop and that we had to mimic based on what we saw from neurotypicals. And that brings us back to the conversation about high functioning versus low functioning. Because in order to get into the high functioning category, an autistic must demonstrate an ability to mimic that neurotypicality, which gives a huge disadvantage to autistics who say are nonverbal. Nonverbal autistics have different ways of communicating and functioning, and in many cases, their ways of functioning are actually superior to that of neurotypicals, and even verbal autistics. However, because they are nonverbal, they're given the classification automatically of low functioning. I once met a nonverbal autistic who was brilliant with claymation and video editing. And I'm interested in video editing myself, but the material that I put forth couldn't even come close to what he does. However, because I can talk, I'm considered high functioning, and because he can't, he's considered low functioning. And that is a completely unfair assessment. Because the way he expresses himself is different from how neurotypicals, how the normal person expresses themselves, it's somehow less valuable. I'm not saying that extra pressure should be put on autistics to display some type of superhuman brilliance, but we cannot think them incapable. Functionality should be defined based on one's ability to pursue their own dreams, their passion. And if they're unable to, then accommodations must be made for physical, mental, or social limitations. We need to have a more neurodiverse definition of functionality. Please understand that autism is highly based on the individual, and understanding the condition should not be based on a vertical spectrum. If you have any questions or topics you'd like addressed, please leave them in the comments below, or message me on my Facebook, also linked below. And remember, if you have ever become a legitimate expert on a sport that you find utterly distasteful simply so you can engage your friends in conversation, you might be autistic.